The Detroit Pistons have absolutely taken the NBA by storm this year, just proving that their success is not only exciting, but absolutely sustainable as they remain on the top of the Eastern Conference by 5 whole games ahead of the second seed. Now, with Detroit, they've been leaving us completely stunned all season because before the season actually started, we were wondering who would actually take the throne in the Eastern Conference, especially with everything that happened to Boston's roster dismantle. Cleveland and Indiana both dealing with the injuries to Garland, Tyrese Halliburton, and Miles Turner's departure as well. I just think it's safe to say now that Detroit have no doubt exceeded our expectations, starting off the year 33-11 with signature wins against multiple top-tier contenders that absolutely validate their success formula for this regular season. Now, with Detroit's success, it's clear that it's not a direct result of their sheer talent or their firepower advantages. This is a roster that, outside of Cade Cunningham, the level of skill is pretty underwhelming. We're talking about a team who their second and third best offensive players are Duncan Robinson and Dennis Jenkins. And that's why those are the only other guys that can really create anything valuable for the offense. And that's why this team actually needs to work on developing that cushion, that level of margin game to game on the hustle and physicality margins, which is what we're going to get into today, which has been absolutely fueling their consistent and sustainable regular season success. Now, for a team to be so dominant in the regular season, this isn't just a good regular season team. This is legit looking like a championship contender from what we're seeing in this regular season. Now, to do that without severe star power, a team like that needs to focus insanely intensively on other factors. Those factors that build up, again, like we just said before, the game-to-game cushion to not just make up for the talent limitations that they have compared to the other top-tier contenders, but to overwhelmingly press them into actual championship contention. Now, that leaves us with 3 core pillars that I have chosen that I believe are mostly driving this absolute hellacious Pistons train. And we're going to start off with pillar 1. So at first, I think the biggest part of their success, a lot of it comes from the defensive side of the ball. So their actual high motor, defensive team-wide identity. That's been the biggest thing fueling this success. So basically from the role guys, the star players, the veterans, all of these guys combine to provide extremely concentrated boosts of intensity into the Pistons' defensive success in making the best offenses in the NBA uncomfortable in every single night through 48-minute games. That's pillar 1. Secondly, we have their general dominance in the frontcourt physicality battle. So really just what builds the initial cushion that they actually develop, particularly driven by their overwhelming physicality standards established by their frontline guys, particularly Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, and Paul Reed. Thirdly, we're just going to go into just their ability to fully rely so insanely heavily on Cade Cunningham as the dedicated offensive engine of this basketball team. So we already know Cade Cunningham, one of the best floor-raising offensive prospects in the league right now. And with the Pistons' talent limitations, especially on the offensive side of the ball, the blessing that Cade has been allowing the actual role players across this roster who are limited skill-wise, allowing those guys to focus on their strengths, being on the defensive side of the ball, on the intensity side of the ball, on the hustle side of the ball, that has been a huge driving factor behind this steam train regular season team. And so those are my 3 pillars. So we're going to go into them one by one. So we're going to go back into that team-wide identity. And so as we do look at what characterizes this Detroit roster, we know the main story. They're second in defensive rating this season, only to OKC, and they actually hold a really strong gap between the third place Spurs in that rating. And it's because of the mix of experience that they have throughout the roster. They have disciplined vets and they have exuberant young athletes, and that makes up the majority of their lineup. And it's mixed also to create just one of the biggest defensive stalwarts of a franchise that we have ever seen in the past 5 years alone. Think about OKC, what Minnesota were able to do in 2024. I reckon this Detroit Pistons defense would rank top 3 amongst the last few seasons in terms of just defensive pressure that they can offer throughout an entire regular season. And as far as the bench goes, I mean, you won't find a more terrifying group of intensified Energizer bunnies as what Detroit can actually throw at you. Because these guys play with absolute concentrated rage. And one of my clear favorites in this department has been Ron Holland. Just a fiery competitor who as a high lottery prospect has struggled with offensive skill in itself. But as far as like lateral perimeter motors and just taxing workloads, like Ron is one of the most intense that you'll get from that point of attack line of type of defender that you could possibly look for in the league right now. You regularly see him on a play like this, picking up Jalen Brunson full court. Mitchell Robinson comes up, he sets the high screen. A big Isaiah Stewart plays a perfect high drop sequence, denying the downhill angle with enough lateral activity, enough for Ron Holland to get back into the frame. But I mean, just watch Ron Holland's actual angle denial, just resisting Brunson's power leverage tools, absorbing contact, forcing him into an extremely tough fader. He'll do that stuff like on routine in isolation all the time. And it's also their bench guys as well. I mean, it's not just Ron Holland, it's Javonte Green, it's Paul Reed, and especially Isaiah Stewart. These are guys who also provide this exact same intense activity continuously, just clobbering dudes all night long. And Isaiah Stewart in particular, he has been probably their most impactful bench guy. And yes, much of it is the offense that he also brings to the table, but his actual defensive anchoring in his designated minutes, just the non-stop activity levels, just the outright intimidating physical strength that he willingly throws around, that's been absolute revelation for Detroit's bench defense this season and much strong into their actual high-motor defensive identity that they've been trying to instill this entire year. And with Big Stu, he just offers more of that unorthodox rim-protecting archetype. So he's not one of those guys, he's not overly lengthy with his wingspan, he's not overly tall either, but he provides incredible ability to actually absorb power with enough mobility traits that make his help side rotations and his hyperactive drop coverage just absolutely elite tier. He's already won Defensive Player of the Month already this season, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets all defensive votes as probably the most impactful defender for this Detroit team right now. And again, like going across from the bigs, it's not just Isaiah Stewart, but Detroit in general, from their front line, they love throwing these low drop looks all the time in drop coverage, but they also like taking risks, letting their bigs roam out on switches as well. And that enables them to also cut off the initial pick and roll advantages that will come to fruition as well. And though this can actually burn them, because I don't think Jalen Duren is the most gifted perimeter container against perimeter scorers, but it does emphasize, the actual switching emphasizes their ability to embrace being uncomfortable. And out of all three, Duren, Paul Reed, and Isaiah Stewart, all of these guys actually have the ability to discombobulate driving ball handlers from their rhythm with just this sheer stable strength that they actually bring and the plus mobility that they have in terms of the lateral movement department on the perimeter. And that's what lets them get away with these sequences when they want to vary up what type of coverage they're throwing at typical ball screen sequences. Now, the motor again though, it's not just the bigs, it's not just the bench, it's also translated through the vets and the stars on this team. It's not just the specialists that exhibit this super high working workhorse type of intensity. And you absolutely know that it is a team-wide identity when your heliocentric offensive guard is out there playing the best defense of his career. Just playing valuable weak side defensive minutes, taking on stronger perimeter assignments willingly. And then not just Cade Cunningham, but even guys like Duncan Robinson, Dennis Jenkins. These are guys that are perceived hunting points that still provide very disciplined value in their roles. And so far, as a team identity, it doesn't get much stronger from top to bottom. And I haven't even mentioned the real defensive specialist of this team, Asar Thompson, who absolutely makes this starting unit just absolutely complete and absolutely versatile by every sense of the word. We're talking about a god-tier athlete, someone with a growing sense of discipline and just an understanding of how to provide pounding activity whilst also staying clean and reserved, not offering those bailout avenues for perimeter creators, getting him out of position, drawing those calls like Jalen Brunson was doing in last playoffs. He's a lot more disciplined than he was last year. And we're talking about the most freakish recovery athlete in the NBA. Maybe only rivaled by his twin brother in that department. And he's been absolutely impeccable for Detroit with his recovery athleticism. And Detroit used him constantly as a weak side plug and recover machine. And then they also, just their ability to rely on that bolting speed, the bolting athleticism, so he can actually hunt those passing lanes and end those advantage sequences with the closeout super speed that he does have, and how scary and frightening it is having an athlete of that absurd explosive athleticism coming directly at you. And he's been absolute revelation once again this year, and he's contributing to a top 3 defense in the league, and he will get his all defense honors, in my opinion, if the season was cut off today. And on this trajectory, he will 100% get that notch on his blazer. But the point is, like, the personnel for Detroit defensively isn't anything exceptionally gifted for a top 2 team defense. But the thing is that they actually share the same identity that has breeded an absolute culture of elite cushion building game to game, simply through making teams uncomfortable for not just stretches, but for entire games start to finish. And this might be the most reminiscent team of what OKC did last year and what OKC is still doing this year in terms of actually being able to stabilize just a hellacious defensive impact throughout an entire game with no ebbs and flows whatsoever. Now, moving on to pillar 2 though, we're gonna be looking at quickly just what actually works at giving Detroit another game-to-game advantage on the offensive end of the floor. We talked about how they are pretty limited skill-wise, and that is a big limiting factor, especially as we do look to the playoffs and as we look to slow down half-court execution. But in terms of the physicality firepower that this team receives from their front-court guys, like, Detroit have been a top 3 rebounding percentage team this season, and they've been the second best offensive rebounding percentage team in basketball, in large part due to the constant brutal punches that are thrown from their bigs to every opposing front line in the NBA. Jalen Duren, one of the most elite offensive rebounding athletes in our game. He's a guy that notches 4 extra possessions alone through just being able to outwork and out-energize and out-physicality all of the opposing bigs in the NBA right now. And much of the glass reads that he makes comes off like literally just the short roll or just setting perimeter ball screens. Because when he's diving to the rim, he has enough movement momentum to be able to crash and bully guys out for optimal position. And it's not just that though, it's just the overall work rate matched with the build that he has that makes these opportunities actually available to him. And aside from Jalen Duren, in terms of the actual front court, Paul Reed, Isaiah Stewart, Asar Thompson, these are all guys that give you at least two offensive rebounds a game. And altogether between these 4 guys, that is nearly 10 extra possessions alone. And obviously they're no Houston when it comes to the offensive rebounding, but they build up such an elite margin for themselves there to help cover up and cushion a lot of the talent limitations that they do have on the roster. And most of the rebounding that comes outside of just the Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart short roll stuff, like where you see Asar Thompson get into the offensive rebounding impact. There's a ton of corner crashes from the wings as well, and from the corners. But then there's just roll man intensity that you cannot buy from any other athletes, and that is what their bigs bring every single night. And that is where you will get the optimal positioning under the rim that makes this one of the biggest feathers in Detroit's cap to actually cushion their offense enough. And then when we're talking about offensive rebounding aside, on the offensive side of the ball, with this physicality in the front line, we're talking about guys who, when they do receive those drop-off passes and when they actually get those roll man possessions to go, both Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart in particular are just so exceptional at lowering the shoulder and winning the physical leverage battle on the ground against any matchup. They both have the mobility to satisfy enough footwork to make, powerful drop steps very, very effective for themselves. And both of them just have a ton more confidence, especially this year, and especially Jalen Duren, at finishing those complex post hooks. And just the way they have been, like, they're not elite by any standard, but it's actually credible offense for this team and actually builds up what they can get out of their actual talent at the moment. And the thing is, by throwing out their physical frames constantly, the way that they do, Detroit can actually get a ton of offensive stability. And the one thing with Detroit Like, they're top 5 in paint touches overall. Like, by crashing and constantly hunting any physicality advantages that they do have on the roster, maybe through cross matches and in transition too, like either on cuts, rolls, putbacks, that allows this limited offensive team to be able to find something that is really like a really crucial dynamic to absolutely milk everything that they can out of this offense. At least to be at least a comfortable team rating. And at the moment, Detroit have been a 116 offensive rating this year. That's good enough for the 11th best in the NBA today, and in large part due to the extra cushion that they're creating through generally milking any physicality traits that they do have on the roster stemming from the front court. But obviously, what makes their offense above just satisfactory, why they are a borderline top 10 offense in the league, is due to their generational floor-raising talent in Cade Cunningham. Now, there might only be 7 to 8 guys that you might take over Cade Cunningham in terms of asking a player to generate complete team offense for 48-minute games for 82 game seasons. And that's because the actual load-carrying potential that Cade Cunningham brings to the game at still just 24 years old is why he was such a coveted prospect coming into the league. And he's 6'6", and he's a powerful 220 pounds. And that basically means that he actually has either an athletic or a physical advantage against basically any matchup that he wants to attack on the floor at any point in time. Strength, explosiveness, foot speed, over-the-top agility, anything that you want, he can actually use to actually create comfortable shots for himself. And that is the draw, not just for the now, but for the future with Cade Cunningham. Obviously, I'm not going to stand here and act like he's this super efficient and hyper reliable creator like an SGA or even like a Jalen Brunson. Because yes, he does create comfortable looks, maybe to a similar level that those guys can. But the efficiency and the shot touch is still a growing pain that he's still working through year to year. Like, he's still below average finishing at the rim. The short range, the mid-range looks, they've all reduced in efficiency from last year. Same trend with the 3-ball as well. But the actual mass volume of created looks, that is the actual draw that Detroit are getting and what all NBA fans and all NBA media are saying out of Cade Cunningham. And the fact that he can viably create comfortable looks at just such a staggering rate, more than most offensive engines that we've seen in recent years. And the fact is, it's just a matter of time before the actual efficiency clip levels itself to the ability for him to actually create. So for the fact that he's creating such a large group of shots at 24 years old, that is the big draw. And that is what he is doing for Detroit right now. And that is backlining really basically alone a 116 offensive rating with such limited personnel. And the thing with Cade that I absolutely love, and it's more of a future thing that I'm interested in, is just the pace control gifts that he actually has. It's just innate to him. And yes, when he does control the pace and stole the pace to a degree, he can be lazy and complacent when he's making his basic reads, and that's why he does still average around 4 turnovers a game. But the ability to comfortably and unforgivingly strangle the pace, and actually, that is one of the most special gifts when you are surrounded by a super limited roster talent-wise, because it takes away the responsibility from the poorer offensive players that are surrounding you on the roster when you are doing all the decision-making, all the rim pressure. And Cade's actual creation toolbox is so diverse that Detroit actually don't even want the ball in anyone else's hands on any possession at all when he's actually on the floor. And that over-reliance has been absolutely huge for Detroit to be able to focus on actually what they are good at, which mostly resides on the defensive side of the ball. And so just for what the raw stats are right now, 25 points, 5 rebounds, and a league-leading 10 assists a game, this guy is just absolutely fueling this offense so much. And it's actually to a point where they actually are a plus offensive team by rating, which is justifying their ability to actually justify themselves as an actual championship contender in this league. And for Detroit, this is where they typically end up historically. Hypercharged physical advantages. that has absolutely marked their franchise's existence during their success years, every single time. And by excelling in any athletic trait, any team in the NBA, like whether it's OKC's speed advantages, the Clippers last year leading to a lot of lengthy wing athleticism advantages, whatever advantage or trait that a roster leans towards, that team will be able to at least develop enough margin in any certain area of the game to build up enough cushion and margin to be a successful regular season team. And come playoff time, historically, it's the teams that pick the physicality traits that actually tend to replicate that regular season formula to their postseason battles. And so that's what makes this Detroit squad in particular, just so exciting to watch. And just like every other historical Detroit champion as well, just physicality has marked their character, and this team is no different. And at this point, like obviously I still have reservations about Detroit being a top tier championship contender, up there with the Denvers, with maybe even the Houstons and the OKCs. Like I don't know if they're there just yet, because there are a lot of unknowns about how their offense will survive in a playoff scenery past the first round. But they definitely get an A+ for everything they've done, being the biggest surprise team this regular season so far because of just how much they've dominated this first half of the season. Detroit look amazing. It's about those three pillars in particular to me. And I have no doubt that this team will be pushing, at the very worst, a conference finals appearance this year.